Some relationships are complicated. Imagine one born from a fading empire, then forged in the fires of the Cold War, and then tested over and over by decades of shifting loyalties. Well, that's pretty much the story of Pakistan and Great Britain. Today, we're going to unpack 5 decades of a partnership that has been, let's just say, anything but predictable.
So it really begs the question, right? How does a brand new nation even begin to build a relationship with its former colonial ruler? I mean, where do you start? For Pakistan and Britain, the answer is, well, it's complicated. As we're about to see, their 50-year journey was a true roller coaster of incredible highs and some really deep lows. Okay, so let's rewind all the way back to 1947. This is the year Pakistan is born. And in the shadow of this departing British Empire, the initial ties between the two countries weren't just strong, they were basically a direct continuation of a shared and, yeah, often very complex history.
And to get a sense of how close they were, just look at this number, 500. What's that about? Well, in 1947, Britain actually loaned 500 of its own military officers to help build the new Pakistan army. I mean, think about that. That is an incredible display of trust right out of the gate, and it really set the stage for what was, at first, a very close relationship.
And it wasn't just about military support, not by a long shot. Britain was also Pakistan's main supplier of arms, a huge trade partner. Heck, Pakistan even stayed a British dominion all the way until 1956. But maybe the most important piece of the puzzle was this. Pakistan was a founding member of the Commonwealth. And that connection, well, it would become a really crucial and sometimes very contentious thread running through their entire story.
So you've got this really strong foundation, right? But it didn't stay that way for long. It quickly evolved into something even bigger, a full-blown strategic partnership. And this wasn't driven by their shared past, oh no. This was all about the anxieties of a brand new global conflict. Yep, the Cold War. It completely reshaped the global map. And suddenly, Pakistan's location made it a critical asset for the West. So, to help counter Soviet expansion, Pakistan jumped in with both feet, joining 2 key military alliances, first SEATO and then the Baghdad Pact. And the payoff? Commonwealth aid started pouring in, funding huge infrastructure projects like the Suez gas pipeline and helping to modernize the country's railways. Honestly, this was the absolute peak of their relationship. What started as these kind of post-colonial ties had transformed into a really powerful alliance, and it was all bound together by one thing, a common enemy, the Soviet Union. But as often happens, alliances forged in the heat of a global conflict, well, they get tested by local realities. In the 1960s and 70s, they would really start to expose a growing gap between what Pakistan wanted and what Britain wanted. Their friendship was about to be put to the test, big time. And this slide, wow, this really captures the huge shift. See, during the run of Kutch border dispute, Britain was right in there, playing the active mediator. But then, just a few months later, during the massive 1965 Indo-Pak War, Britain completely stepped back. They declared neutrality. It was a crystal clear signal that Britain, with its empire shrinking, was totally redefining its role in the world. And that new policy of neutrality? It was about to reach its absolute breaking point during the East Pakistan crisis. When Britain officially recognized the new nation of Bangladesh, Pakistan saw it as a profound betrayal. The response was just as dramatic. In 1972, Pakistan walked out of the Commonwealth, severing one of the most important links to its own past. But what's really interesting is that even during this political deep freeze, some connections held on. The Commonwealth, for example, kept funding massive development projects like the War-Saken Mangla dams. It's a sign that even when diplomacy gets icy, sometimes the economic ties can still survive the chill. And it's kind of ironic. Just as regional conflicts had pulled them apart, a new global crisis was about to bring them right back together, opening up a whole new and just as complex chapter in their story. The game changer? The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. This changed everything. Suddenly, Pakistan was on the absolute front line of the Cold War, and its strategic importance to the West, including Britain, just skyrocketed. Britain threw its full support behind Pakistan, pouring in aid for the millions of Afghan refugees who were flooding across the border. Now, there's a fancy diplomatic term for this thawing of relations, rapprochement, and actually, the seeds for this were planted even before the invasion. You had high-level visits between the prime ministers of both countries, And these weren't just photo ops, not at all. They were a really clear signal that both sides wanted to start mending those fences. But this new era, oh, it was a true roller coaster for sure. You have this massive high point when Pakistan rejoins the Commonwealth in 1989, a huge symbolic healing of old wounds. But then, bam, 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 a series of lows. You've got the international backlash after Pakistan's nuclear tests, which really put it at odds with Britain. Then tensions flare up again during the Kargil conflict. And finally, the relationship turns outright unfriendly after the 1999 military coup, which just flew in the face of the Commonwealth's principles of democracy.
So I think this quote just perfectly captures the whole thing. It really has been a relationship of incredible peaks and deep valleys, and it's almost never been driven by sentiment or friendship, but by the cold, hard math of shifting global priorities.
And all of this really brings us to a much bigger question, doesn't it? Are these kinds of post-colonial relationships just destined to be a permanent roller coaster, always hostage to the whims of global politics? Or is there a way for them to forge a new path, one that's based on genuinely shared values instead of just strategic interests? It's definitely a question worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me for this breakdown.